letter from the People's Library in Madrid, Spain, to the People's Library in OWS, New York. We have been following OWS from the very first day, and let's say we are glad to see that you found the way to organize you up almost in the same way we did while we were camping at the City Hall Square in Madrid at Puerta del Sol. We only want to thank all of you to be there, because maybe you don't realize it, but you're making our dream come true. Obviously, to do the right thing, far from being a utopia or related to culture, is a matter of common sense.
We should say that none of us decided to open up a library during our occupation. It appeared by itself. People who came to support us wanted us to have some of their books. They wanted us to read and to take care of them. We started out with only 40 titles. People came up to rest from the everyday routines, trying to find a shelter in the written words under the blue tent. Poets showed up to read them their works and free thinkers their essays. The manager of one major corporate library in town gave us book carts and everything we needed. Just don't tell anyone, he asked. One donation came after another, and in a few weeks we reached nearly 4,000 titles at our outdoor library.
Among other interesting items from the OWSNY librarian's presentation, they mentioned that prior to the November 15th eviction, their library had cataloged 4,000 books. They had a tent, shelves, tables, chairs, bins, laptops, and miscellaneous supplies. As part of the post-midnight surprise eviction, virtually all of it was hauled off by New York authorities in garbage trucks. Shortly after the raid, the mayor's office sent out a picture via Twitter of some books on a table, saying that the People's Library was safe and that we'd be able to go and recover it. In fact, the librarians were able to recover only 802 of the library books, nearly 300 of which were in only marginally usable condition, and none of their other property was returned.
Intro to the Occupy Library project. Most Occupy camps had libraries, including the camp in Dallas, and when the camps were evicted, the libraries were largely destroyed. We're interested in creating art-assisted reincarnations of these libraries. More particularly, the project mission is to use aesthetically informed strategies to lure artists and other citizens towards info that can help empower the 99%, as well as to foster critical and cultural awareness in general. We plan to start by creating 1 or 2 bookmobile carts, one of which could live in a gallery or community space while the other hits the streets. But it turns out we're creating this first. The bookmobile carts could be called the People's Occupied Pop-Up Library All-Terrain Book Buggies, Pop Labs, and possibly consist of a souped-up book-filled laundry cart or other mobile unit with excessive tires, and an eye-catching sign which could perambulate populated areas in an amusing/alluring manner. Additional evolutions could include a pop-up library installation, the People's Occupy Pretty Big Top Education Plus Networking Tent, Pop Tent, that could temporarily live in available gallery spaces, schools, campuses, community centers, etc. It could host performances, art talks, screenings, readings, etc., as well as books, videos, plus other materials. Artist-modified or created books or information packets plus open, core, blind cut curated art shows are some other ideas. Everyone invited to help us co-recreate reality, only better.
Knowledge is power, Sir Francis Bacon.
An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people. Thomas Jefferson.
Human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. H.J. Wells.
A balance of power requires a balance of knowledge.
A modern economic system demands mass production of students who are not educated and have been rendered incapable of thinking. UNEF Strasbourg.
It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. By William Carlos Williams.
Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is an ancient and eternal law, the Dhammapada.
True nonviolence is mightier than the mightiest violence. Mahatma Gandhi.
We forget that the question is not, how do we get good people into power? The question is, how do we limit the damage the powerful can do to us? Chris Hedges.
Civil disobedience is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is that people all over the world have obeyed the dictates of leaders and millions have been killed because of this obedience. Howard Zinn.
All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. The opposite of good is not evil, it's apathy. Cindy Sheehan.
Every time we witness an injustice and do not act, we train our character to be passive in its presence and thereby eventually lose all ability to defend ourselves and those we love. Julian Assange.
There's a crucial difference between knowing shit and expressing it in a way that will make people give a fuck. William Pauhida.
We can't do it alone. The idea is that you do it. We spend our efforts getting the information to you and allow you to publish it. But you've got to turn it into a story and make it moving to the population. Julian Assange.
It's class warfare and my class is winning, but they shouldn't be. Warren Buffett.
Information is the new wealth, and the info war is the new class war. It's not a war against or for any particular nation. It's a struggle between old and new power structures as to who will control information.
He who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. George Orwell.
It was too late to prevent the Great Fall, but it was still possible at least to cut short the intermediate period of chaos. Isaac Asimov, regarding the efforts of the authors of the Encyclopedia Galactica. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead.
They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself.
They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself.
They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. Andy Warhol.
Let's do something while we have the chance. It's not every day that we are needed. Let us make the most of it before it's too late. Samuel Beckett.
Nothing is inevitable except defeat for those who give up without a fight. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, 1961, script by Aaron Allen and Charles Bennett.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
First, they ignore you. Then, they laugh at you. Then, they fight you. And then, you win. Mahatma Gandhi.
Knowledge is power, Sir Francis Bacon.
An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people. Thomas Jefferson.
A balance of power requires a balance of knowledge.
Human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. H.G. Wells.
A modern economic system demands mass production of students who are not educated and have been rendered incapable of thinking. UN E.F. Strasberg.
What is most educational is most aesthetic, and what is most aesthetic is most educational. Namjoon Paik.
It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. William Carlos Williams. In all history, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. Sun Tzu.
The war is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous. George Orwell.
Only puny secrets need protection. Big discoveries are protected by public incredulity. Marshall McLuhan.
Why, of course the people don't want war. Why should some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life when the best he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece? But it is always a simple matter for the leaders to drag the people along. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. Hermann Goering.
Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is ancient and eternal law, the Dhammapada.
We forgot that the question is not how to get good people into power. The question is how do we limit the damage that the powerful can do to us? Chris Hedges.
In framing a government, you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place to oblige it to control itself. James Madison.
There's always a tendency to look for the most charismatic person, because that, in a way, solves your leadership problem, but only in the short term. You can't counter institutional power with good intentions or charisma alone. You have to build your own institutional power. Mike Gecken, recorded by Stutz Terkel.
I consider it completely unimportant who will vote or how. But what is extraordinarily important is this: who will count the votes and how? Joseph Stalin.
Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Frederick Douglass.
Civil disobedience is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is that people all over the world have obeyed the dictates of leaders, and millions of them have been killed because of this obedience. Howard Zinn.
The opposite of good is not evil, it's apathy. Cindy Sheehan. There's a crucial difference between knowing shit and expressing it in a way in which people give a fuck. William Palhaida.
It's class warfare.
My class is winning, but it shouldn't be. Warren Buffett.
Who benefits? Lucius Cassius Longinus.
When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men, over the course of time, they create a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Frédéric Bastiat.
He who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. George Orwell.
What a huge debt this nation owes to its troublemakers. From Thomas Paine to Martin Luther King, they have forced us to focus on problems we would prefer to downplay or ignore. Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead.
They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. Andy Warhol.
The revolution is not an apple that falls when it is ripe. You have to make it fall. Che Guevara.
We are never tired so long as we can see far enough. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
First, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then you fight them.
Actually, it's Gandhi. They fight you. Gandhi's like, don't fight them. You get the whole nonviolence thing backwards there.
There goes. I'm gonna fight you. First, they ignore you. Then they fight you. Oh, wait, actually. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Mahatma K. Gandhi. Mahatmas. I still say Mahatmas. Mahatmas.
Let's do it one more time.
First, they ignore you, and then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. Mahatma Gandhi.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Gandhi.